Hi YouTubers, this is Daryl. I want to share with you some of the tips that I use to make this installation of this transmission a little easier. First I want to start with how I jack the car up. Now the instructions say when you want to measure the drive shaft you want to have the full weight on the suspension. So instead of having to jack the car down and try to crawl under it, I kept it all jacked up, but I jacked it up underneath the rear axle and the front suspension as well as the frame. So what I did, I show a model here of a Chevelle. The back car, I put jacks right under the axle, as far out as I could go. Now if you have a sway bar on this, some sway bars are in the way, so you'd have to take the sway bar off and then put your jacks as close as you can get to the wheel. That way when it is sitting on those jacks, the full weight is on the springs and the suspension of the rear axle. Then I put two jacks underneath the corners of the frame right behind the front wheel. And then I also put jacks on the front suspension just right here, so that it's all mimicked having the weight on the suspension. The car didn't bend at all, or the frame bend a little bit, because if you don't have anything supporting the front suspension, the weight of that engine will pull that front of the car down just a little bit. So by keeping the jacks underneath the suspension and some of the frame, they kept the car in line so it wouldn't throw off any kind of measurements that you would have to take for your drive shaft. Also, when you take out the transmission, there's nothing supporting the engine, so you're going to have to put some kind of support underneath the engine at the oil pan. And what I did, I just used a concrete block and some 2x4s to get it just at the right angle, as if the engine was sitting attached to that transmission on the cross member, sitting at the right angle. So those are some tips that I use to make this installation, and measuring that drive shaft and getting the drive shaft angle right easier without having to lower the car and putting it on the floor. The next thing I want to go over is, for those of you that don't have access to a transmission jack, you're going to need to make yourself a little transmission dolly. And the reason for this is it's going to make it a lot easier to move this transmission down, slide it underneath the car, and then get it up to where you need to bolt it to the bell housing. So I just take this little floor dolly out of some 2x12s. It probably measures about 2 feet by 2 feet. On the back I just have little wheels, and then I had to put some 3/4 inch plywood underneath the wheels to kind of make them a little taller so that I could fit a jack underneath here. I also made these back wheels of the dolly wider so that again I can get that jack underneath. So you put the dolly on the floor and it will just slide right underneath, and then you can jack that up to whatever height you need to maneuver that transmission into the bell housing. Now also, if you just put this on the transmission, we'll use the old Muncie here. If you just put this on as so, it's not going to be lined up, it's going to be unstable, it's just not going to stay square. So you can take yourself some pieces of wood, various shapes, you can put it underneath the transmission at certain spots so that it now sits square. You just line it up, put it anywhere you need to secure that transmission so that it's stable, so as you move it around it's not unstable. So now we have a transmission that you can just move anywhere, line it up underneath the car, and you can angle at the right angle to slide it in there and make it a lot easier to install this. You can't really do it by yourself unless you have some kind of transmission jack or some kind of dolly like this that you can slide over a jack to put it up there. The Tremec transmission is just too big and too heavy for just one person to do this. So those are some tips that I use to make installing this a do-it-yourself project that you can do by yourself. Until next time.